Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months.
Yo to Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, first off, my apologies. We're still not over this head cold or whatever it is, but we have to get our draft grades video out, right? Like, there's no excuse at this point. I'm too hyped. I can't keep my mouth shut about it. I've been bugging my wife about it. She's like, yo, talk to your Chargers friends, you know? Go do your YouTube thing. That's why you do the YouTube thing. Well, we're here doing the YouTube thing today, grading out the Chargers 2023 rookie class, which honestly, I think the Bolt fam was super hyped on. I don't know if I've seen quite the reaction like I saw this last draft. Over 3,000 Chargers fans showed up just for the first day alone, which absolutely knocked my socks off. And I think it's because, again, the Chargers were kind of in a unique position this season. No huge pressing needs, but definitely I think the Chargers fans wanted to see the team go one way or another. And I think in the end, when you take a step back and you look at the big picture, the Chargers really did accomplish that. And now when you take a look at a big picture, look at the roster, it's one of the more well-rounded rosters you're going to find in the league. One of the craziest wide receiver cores you're going to find. Some all of a sudden good depth in the offensive and defensive line, and then some big potential in guys like Tuli Tuipulotu. I think we're going to have some good times in this one today, guys. So in today's video, we're going to go round by round, player by player, and give you guys my grade on how the Chargers did with this selection. It's going to be a good time. You guys in the comment section below, please follow along. Give me your grades, and we'll kind of get a feel for what the Chargers fandom feels about the 2023 Chargers rookie class. So before we do get started, guys, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. Small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. And of course, we cannot forget our shout out to our friends at Underdog Fantasy. If you guys want to join the best fantasy platform on the web, use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100. And with that, let's get into this one. Lights, camera,
Action!
My grades for the Chargers 2023 NFL Draft. You guys wondering where the Chargers drip is today? It's right here. We're also playing the new Jedi Fallen Order game, so I had to get a little Chargers, a little Star Wars in the wardrobe today. So let's go ahead and kick things off in our grading for the 2023 draft class for the Chargers. And again, guys, this was one of those like unique drafts where I don't know if I was so stressed out that I needed the Chargers to draft one way or another. I wanted for the most part to put my feet up and just kind of react to what was going on in front of me, but it was really hard not to carry that bias of, man, you know, in the first round, I want to see the Chargers take this position or look for this trait in the case of speed for a lot of, I would say, any position on the Chargers offense or defense. And then also value. I think that's a big thing that the Chargers fans and the community reacted to when we selected Quentin Johnston with the 21st pick in the first round. And honestly, I think it threw a lot of us for a loop because in the end, when you take a look, I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. Spoiler alert, my grade for Quentin Johnston's a good one. We'll go ahead and reveal it here in just a second. But I think the wind kind of got taken out of our sails as a fandom because of the other players that were still available on the board. Okay, it kind of made us like maybe put some blinders on, saying, you know what, if we want the maximum value at 21, this is the position we need to be drafting, and this is the player we need to be drafting. I think for most of us, it came down between Nolan Smith and Myles Murphy. I think honestly, a lot of us look at that position of edge and we think to ourselves, that's going to be the one that's going to pay off the most in the long run. We see these guys still available at 21. We would kind of be insane for not taking this position, let alone these players that are still available on the board. Not a lot of mock drafts had those guys, let alone both of them, still available at pick 21. But lo and behold, the Chargers, it seems that they had a plan all along at pick 21 where they wanted to go receiver. They wanted to go receiver that carried some upside in terms of a couple of different traits. For one, speed. And that's something that Tom Telesco, Brandon Staley, even Kellen Moore has talked a lot about in terms of what this team needs to add. We got Justin Herbert, big arm. We got an offense that could really be moving the ball vertically a little bit more efficiently than other teams because of the talents of our quarterback, but we just don't have players that can access that part of the field as fast as it will be required for Justin Herbert to use those plays as effectively. And the Chargers knew this. I think Tom Telesco knew this. And going into the first round, I think Tom kind of knew that he wanted to go wide receiver. Now, the biggest question I need to ask myself, and I was asking myself a lot after the draft, was if, let's say, Quentin Johnston was the first wide receiver off the board, and we were looking at a selection between, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, et cetera, would Tom Telesco still have gone wide receiver? And honestly, guys, and again, this is why I bring it up, I don't think he would have, because of the specific kind of wide receiver that Tom Telesco was looking for. And again, kind of crazy to think about, but think about it this way. The Chargers, let's say Zay Flowers was the guy there, right? But we also see a Nolan Smith, Miles Murphy. I think that Chargers likely go edge in that scenario because the wide receiver that they have in front of them, or the ones that in terms of, Addison and Flowers and stuff like that, those guys you're going to see operating a lot from the slot. And this is something that we mentioned in our last video regarding a Quentin Johnston. If you guys want more detail on it, please check it out. But the Chargers, it seems, they have an identity that they're trying to stick to. They've got their two outside receivers that need to carry specific traits, speed and size. Mike Williams has that. Now Quentin Johnston, absolutely probably the best speedster in terms of well-rounded out receiver on the roster now. But they need those guys playing the perimeter because that slot position seems like there's like a reserve sign, almost like that special parking spot when you pull into work. That reserve sign reads Keenan Allen because Keenan Allen, who's starting to seem like more of a long-term plan for the Chargers, does some of his best work from the slot and is still today the Chargers' best wide receiver. So they want to put him in the best position to succeed. I don't think you're going to be able to do that with a player like Zay Flowers or Jordan Addison, whereas these guys are going to have to play a majority of their snaps from the slot, pushing Keenan Allen to the outside. In the end, when you take a look at the Quentin Johnston selection, the kind of receiver that he is, the traits that he's bringing to the table in terms of speed, in terms of size, he has the upside to kind of play physically like a Mike Williams in the future, even though that's really not his game right now. I think the Chargers had an idea of what they wanted at wide receiver. They got what they needed in there. They didn't really let the blinders of we're looking for value in the first round or whatever move them off the fact that they had an objective for a receiver, and they got it done. Chargers fans, if you want to know my thoughts on Quentin Johnston, please check out that video. But in the end, you're getting a guy that's very fast, works a deep part of the field very, very well. He's going to be the Chargers' deep threat. Defenses are going to have to respect this offense a lot more with Justin Herbert and Quentin Johnston building chemistry over the season. I think he's going to be an awesome pick for the Chargers. I would give it 3-4 weeks before that impact becomes very obvious to the Chargers fan and its community in terms of the difference maker he's going to be for this team. So I'm going to give the Quentin Johnston pick at pick 21 a grade of a B+. And I would say the only reason it's not in the A's or even higher than that is because there was some value in front of him. I have to take that into consideration when doing these grades. But the Chargers, in terms of the pure player, they got exactly what they needed, exactly what this team needed. And honestly, in terms of upside, the highest upside receiver in the entirety of the 2023 wide receiver class. So Quentin Johnston, welcome to the Chargers. I would say an A+ smash hit. Chargers fans, trust me, I would say, again, at the very latest by midseason, you're going to see exactly why Quentin Johnston is labeled the deep threat for the Chargers offense. He's going to unlock so much potential for our quarterback, as well as what the defense has to respect. Next up, let's move into round 2. At pick 54, the Chargers would select Tuli Tuipulotu, edge out of USC. Now, this is where things get interesting because, again, if the Chargers go edge in the first round, we're not getting Tuli in the second round, obviously, and we're going to be getting more than likely a wide receiver with the traits of speed, which could have ended up being Jalin Hyatt. Now, I think if I remember correctly, Jalin Hyatt ended up falling into the third round, which really paints a picture as to how teams view Jalin Hyatt's talent and how he would fit into the NFL. To me, it kind of screams this guy's kind of the one trick, pony in terms of let's go ahead and run that go route and hope to beat the defense up over top and just kind of do that over and over, where a guy as Quentin Johnston carries way more in terms of potential in route running, playing the deep part of the field, yak ability, which is something we didn't even mention with Quentin Johnston, crazy yak machine. So you kind of have to weigh that out, right? In terms of what the Chargers get in the first and second round in reality, which was Quentin Johnston, Tuli Tuipulotu, or what they get in Fantasyland, which could have been like a Nolan Smith and a Jalin Hyatt. Both look good, but I think in the end, in terms of value, in terms of quality player, the duo of Quentin Johnston and Tuli Tuipulotu might actually be better than a Nolan Smith and a Jalin Hyatt, because that's the biggest thing I'm hearing from the Bolt fam. Say, we could have gotten that. I'm starting to think that the jump between Jalen Hyatt and Quentin Johnston is so big, so large, that even though Nolan Smith is probably going to end up being the better, or more, I should say, more elite edge defender, I don't know if that gap is quite as large between him and Tuli, if that kind of makes sense. So let's get into the player here. Tuli Tuipulotu, one of my favorite defensive players in this entire draft class. For one, the biggest thing that you're going to look at when you look up Tuli is his accomplishment in terms of the sack category. Okay, this guy, 13.5 sacks last season, leading the nation. And this is actually his second season with PFF, posting a grade above 80 as well. Absolutely insane. And when I was looking into the edge players that I would like seeing in the second round, sure, there was other guys that I think might have had a slightly higher upside, like Derek Hall, et cetera, who ended up getting drafted way, early in the second round. I thought Tuli was one of those guys that, just like Quentin Johnston, his upside is kind of crazy too, even if his floor isn't quite as clear, right? And again, it's very similar in terms of what you're getting, Quentin Johnston, Tuli Tuipulotu, those two different positions, but the upside is certainly very, very exciting. Okay, I would almost say limitless at this point, because take a look at Tuli, the player, 20 years old, 13.5 sacks just last season. He's going to just keep getting better, in my opinion, right? Only 20 years old. You have a lot of time to keep figuring things out, man, especially considering where he landed in the draft, right? If Tuli goes to a lot of other programs or a lot of other teams in the NFL, I don't know if he stands as good a chance to develop as he does here with the Los Angeles Chargers. Under defensive-minded head coach Brandon Staley, I think Tuli is going to be finding himself in a very, very good situation to continue developing. And that is a really good sign for Chargers fans. Of course, a lot of Chargers fans in the chat, when we first drafted Tuli, and they started looking at the highlights, and they're starting seeing the similarities, or I should say the nods, right? The nods to the former, USC Polynesian player and Junior Seau, and everyone's getting all excited. That's super, super cool, man. I'm super excited to see the Bolt fam react that way. But when you look past even all the nostalgia factors, and you look past all of even the fog of the 13.5 sacks, this guy really is one of the most exciting prospects to see, what they're going to be in the next 3 years, because they're already starting so good at so young of an age that behind a guy like Brandon Staley, something could really, really happen, right? That kind of huge jump in development could really, really happen. Now, the only knock that I would say I was looking at in terms of, I would not say the only knock, but one of the bigger ones that I was maybe a little bit concerned about was maybe his label as a tweener, right? Because a lot of people couldn't quite nail if his best fit would be rushing from the inside or the outside, interior pass rusher, or more of an edge defender in the NFL. That's, again, something that I think fits his situation with the Chargers. I think he's in a good spot here, because in Staley's system, I think he's going to get a nice combo of opportunities to be playing both, right? It almost feels like somebody in my chat asked or told me that it almost feels like this is that draft pick that's stepping into the Kyle Van Noy role, which is absolutely a great thing to say, a great comparison to make right now, because of the size and speed that you're getting out of a Tuli, who graded very crazy, by the way, in terms of his the way he moves, and in terms of his size is absolutely remarkable. But you'll be able to do a lot of the same things with Tuli that you were doing with Kyle Van Noy last season. You play him, in the middle, rushing from the inside, which is pretty insane. You put him on the outside like Kyle Van Noy did a lot later in the season. You could also line him up, in the interior. You can do a lot of different things. And again, Brandon Staley is probably one of the best coaches in the NFL to instill players like this in the next level, if that kind of makes sense. I do expect to see a lot of Tuli being moved around. I do expect to see a majority of his snaps perhaps on the edge. If we had to pick where he does belong, I do think he's going to be an edge player for this team. But I think the fact that he's so versatile is another I don't know, something we should be excited about with this particular player. This is another huge win for the Chargers, the fact that he's so versatile. Whereas in another team, I don't know if that's as big of a win, because you're going to try and hope that he fits in one spot and gets better right there. I think the Chargers are just fine with letting him do a little bit of everything, while maybe also prioritizing edge. So I'm very excited about that. And again, the Chargers, I feel like this season, a lot of people were asking me, where does he fit this year? I think this season, he Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, and then let's say he plays a little bit more in the interior, Morgan Fox, all those guys can be on the field at the same time, which is absolutely nuts, okay? we're going to see, I think, one of the better seasons in a long time in the terms of pass rush from the Chargers because of how many people we have there in terms of not just rotation, but if we want to see more of that eagle front that, you know, Brandon Staley was so famous for before getting hired for the Chargers, I think, or, you know, like a 5-man front, I think we're going to see a lot more of that this season because we have the personnel to execute it. In terms of what his role will be in the future, I mean, like, we all know that he's the kind of great player that you can step in lieu of a guy like Khalil Mack if the Chargers need to move on from him next season or the season after that. You know, his power rushing style really fits, you know, beautifully opposite of Joey Bosa or even, you know, in the interior. This guy really is foolproof. And I'm very excited to see him develop into I honestly do see him developing into a star. It almost feels like when the Chargers drafted Uchenna Nwosu, right? You were expecting to see, you know, somebody pretty solid or whatever. And then over time, he just really turned into this kind of beast. And I see even higher ceiling with Tuli than I do in Uchenna Nwosu. And Uchenna was great for this team. So honestly, Tuli, I think he's going to be awesome. I think there's a chance that he finds a home in the interior, but I do see him playing a lot on the outside. Whatever happens, he's going to be a difference maker. So I'm going to give this pick a grade of an A. I would say an absolute slam dunk pick for the Chargers at edge. He's going to be a big difference maker. All right. Now, as we continue into this video, I promise you guys it's not going to be too long. We're going to do it a little bit faster, I would say, after round 4. So up next, the Chargers in round 3 at pick 85. They went ahead and selected Daiyan Henley, linebacker out of Washington State. Wow, dudes. Okay, so there was a couple of positions that I knew the Chargers were going to have to hit on in this draft, and linebacker was sneakily up there. I think linebacker and safety were those sneaky positions for me that were up there in priority for the Chargers. The Chargers ended up not taking a safety, but linebacker, this is one where I think they actually did hit on pretty well. And it's a player that, I'll be honest, at first, I was kind of let down that we didn't target a guy like Trent Simpson, who was still there, or Dorian Williams, because in my mind, and in the articles that I had read, and it's kind of the way I was fitting these players in terms of priority for the Chargers, those guys were the great coverage guys, right? And what kind of shocked me is that in furthering my research on Henley after we had selected him, I came to find out that he is perhaps one of the best in terms of coverage in this entire draft class, right? There was just some very specific things in coverage that he still needed to work on. For whatever reason, that stuck in my mind, and I put him aside when I really shouldn't have done that. Henley should have been one of those top linebackers on my radar. I remember thinking that he would be awesome in terms of pass rushing because I saw a lot of good things in terms of him as a pass rusher. But in terms of what the Chargers, and I would say most NFL defenses are looking for nowadays, Henley in terms of coverage is a slam friggin' dunk. Okay, and this is going to be a pick that is going to reflect the Chargers' success for very, very many years, because that is what this team asks its linebackers to do. Defend the run as well as you can, but these linebackers, I would say primarily, are out there to cover, you know, tight ends and running backs, and that's a big ask, right? And we've seen the Chargers go after linebackers that couldn't quite hold up in coverage, like, you know, Kenneth Murray. That I think that, you know, even a guy like Henley in the third round, a third rounder, is going to step in there and probably take that job very, very quickly because of those strengths. Him and Eric Kendricks, they look very similar. As a matter of fact, I think that franchise guy, I was watching one of his videos a couple of days ago, he said that Eric Kendricks was his comp for Daiyan Henley. That was his ceiling comp. Like, man, if this guy really like emerges in the NFL as something, he's going to be the next Eric Kendricks. And to see the Chargers land Henley, who already have Kendricks on their roster, that is a huge deal. In terms of unlocking like maximum potential in terms of ceiling, being able to be mentored by the guy that really mimics your style of play and your strengths and weaknesses is going to be a massive deal in terms of his development. So that's already pretty cool, right? That's already pretty cool. Now, funny enough, in terms of coverage as well, I think he was even above Dorian Williams, who is like my best outside guy, or I would say coverage guy outside of a Jack Campbell, right? Now, the first thing I noticed, again, because we wanted to fire up the highlights, kind of get fresh eyes on the prospect that we drafted during the live stream. When I fired up the live stream, I did notice just how fast this dude is. That's the first thing that you notice when you're watching this guy in motion, right? He moves smoothly, sideline to sideline, and I think it's because he ended up playing wide receiver. I think that was his first role in terms of football at the collegiate level, and then he ended up switching to the defensive side pretty late, but really finding his footing as a football player. Man, dude, it really shows on tape, how smooth this guy is, how fast he is working sideline to sideline. He's got excellent coverage versus tight ends and running backs, particularly, I would say, in man, which is really rare and impressive from the linebacker position. Again, that's because this guy, that's what his game was a couple of years ago. And that's something that really excites me, his movement. That really excites me. But my goodness, his utility is remarkable, right? Again, I would say most NFL teams, especially the Chargers, they're going to be asking their linebackers to cover a lot, but it's what you can do outside of that excites me with Daiyan Henley, right? I saw this dude do it all, right? From coverage to stopping the run. He's a great tackler, a great tackler. And impressively, as a pass rusher too, that's initially, I think, the impression he left on me a couple months ago when I was first kind of going over these linebacker prospects, is that this dude was actually really good at getting to the quarterback from the interior. This guy was all over the quarterback on multiple occasions. Go watch some of his highlight videos, I think, show his ability to kind of wiggle through all the chaos in the middle of that line to get to the quarterback, and he does such a good job at it. And it seemed like Washington State really designed a lot of plays around that and his ability to get to the QB from the inside. And I feel like, again, Staley, I think is just the kind of, defensive-minded head coach that's going to see that and take advantage of that and maybe design some plays around that ability. Now, as a matter of fact, I see a lot of, what's the position that Derwin plays? The safety at the linebacker position on the edge. Is it the star position? Or is it the X position? Either way, I see Daiyan Henley having the ability to play that a lot more, which will, again, give you another chess piece to mix and match with Derwin James. Because I think, again, if you watch him rush from the weak side, this guy's getting home almost every single time. He's perfect in terms of his get off and being able to find the right angle and just pursue, just close that distance super fast. Very, very impressive. Very, very impressive. So again, I think Brandon Staley's going to love this guy. I think Chargers fans are going to love this guy. He's going to be a very, I think, important piece of this defense going forward. And hopefully the first Chargers linebacker that actually gets paid in 4 years. Okay, Chargers fans are going to love him too, because I don't know if you guys saw some of his interviews with the Chargers already. I think Dan from Chargers Unleashed, he texted me the next day. He's like, dude, you got to watch this. It was hilarious. The dude's so excited to be a Charger, so excited to be in Los Angeles. He's going to be a big deal for the Chargers. So I'm going to give this one a grade of an A-. So not too bad so far. We got Quentin Johnston with the B+. We got Tuli with the A, and now we got Daiyan Henley with the A+, or the A-. So far, so good. Let's get into round 4 here. At pick 125, the Chargers take another TCU wide receiver in Darius Davis. Oh, man. I know, dudes. I think Chargers fans, we've been harping for it for a long time. Guess what, Bull fam? We finally got our deep threat, our speed demon. Some people were like, oh my God, we got Tyreek Hill. I see it a little bit. Yeah, he's smaller, 5'8", very, very fast. Let's go ahead and pump the brakes just a little bit, but also be excited for what we actually got. All right. So first off, Darius Davis clocking in at a 4.36 at the combine. He is a lightning bolt, super, super fast. But like his TCU counterpart, it reads much faster in game, okay? I think a lot of people were put off with Quentin Johnston because I'm like, man, he only ran a 4.5. No, okay, that's pro day numbers. Those things are often skewed. From what I was watching, even before all of the combine stuff, I was like, my eyes told me, man, this guy's probably sub 4.4, at the very worst, like a 4.45. And lo and behold, most of the more accurate testing for Quentin Johnston put him in at 4.46, I think. So he's a very fast receiver. Same thing applies to Darius Davis. A 4.36, which is a very respectable time, very, very fast. You see him in game day, it looks even faster than that, right? It looks closer to like a 4.32, even if in some situations, very rarely, a sub 4.3. This dude's a lightning bolt out there. And I do envision that this guy's going to immediately have a role with the Chargers day one, week one, snap one on this team. And it's something that I have to give the Chargers a lot of credit for, because, again, I see him, for one. A lot of people are asking me, like, director, do you see this guy being, him and Jalen Guyton, or him and Quentin Johnston? Maybe go 5 wide. Is he going to be our deep threat? He's going to be our deep threat. I do see the Chargers throwing Davis in a few times a game to stretch the field. I absolutely do. I think he's going to be at first, maybe a minimal part in terms of actual offensive snaps, but I do think he's going to play a role. I really do. Because, again, on offense, you're going to see him do some things, but the role that he's going to be coming onto this team specifically for is going to be a return specialist, and I have to add, a gadget player. Okay, that is specific. When you watch this guy and you see his specialties and you see what he does so well, that could translate into the NFL. He's a return specialist and a gadget player. Now, first off, Davis, in terms of his special teams upside, and a big reason why I think the Chargers may have reached for him, I'm going to say they did reach for him in the 4th round, is because of his special teams expertise. Whereas you look at other players like Trey Palmer, I think Tyler Scott was even available at this time, which did kind of like throw me off. I was like, man, those guys are really good. I wonder why we went with Darius Davis instead. I do think it's because of his speciality in special teams play. He has like 6 special teams touchdowns, 6 special teams touchdowns to his name, which again is a testament to his speed, but also his experience playing special teams. And special teams has started to become a very huge focal point of the Chargers, right? And we've started to see it improve. You guys remember the Chargers special teams 3-4 years ago? Awful, terrible. Sometimes a big reason why we lost games. Sometimes reasons why we didn't get into the postseason. Special teams was that bad. So when I see the Chargers in 2023, in my opinion, reach for a wide receiver that is really just going to be your return specialist, also kind of thrown in there a little bit, I would say sprinkled in, peppered in as an offensive weapon, I actually don't hate it as much as I thought I would. Okay, because he's bringing, again, the things that the Chargers need to this team. They needed speed, they need receiver, which again maybe now it's a little bit cup overfloweth, but they also need a special teams demon, and that's something very exciting. Now, another thing that kind of went under the radar with the Bull fam was his utilization as a gadget player, and that's something that obviously the Chargers kind of want. They've been forcing it on players that it doesn't fit with for the past couple of years with Joe Lombardi. What I'm talking about are those swings, screens, sweeps, whatever, right? All that nonsense behind the line of scrimmage play that drove Chargers fans crazy. I think the reason it wasn't working is because we didn't really have a player that could utilize it, right? They didn't have the acceleration. They didn't have the burst. They didn't have the experience in those trick plays to really execute on them. Finally, we got a guy that can do that, right? And he was utilized in various creative ways at TCU just for those purposes. Again, the swings, the screens, the sweeps. He was very, very good at those, right? At the Lombardi things, he was very good at all the Lombardi things, right? That's Davis's bread and butter. And he also comes into this team as another yak machine, right? You get the ball into this guy's hands, that he's going to create yards. He's going to create yards. So almost think of him as like a rotational / special teams version of like a Deebo Samuel, right? The guy's going to be a great returner, but also you can use him in a lot of creative various ways while also stretching the field with him every once in a while. I think he's going to be a great player for this team. Honestly, I think his upside's a lot higher than a lot of people give him credit for, but I do have to say, in grading Darius Davis, I do have to say the value does carry a lot of weight for me. If he was selected in the next round, I think I would have given him like a B+. If he was selected in the 6th round, which is kind of where I had him between 5 and 6, I would have given it probably an A- or an A+ even. In this round, I have to give it a C+ because I still think it's a huge reach. I honestly, truthfully think he would have been available next round if the Chargers just waited one more. But either way, I think the Chargers got what they needed. They needed the specialist in terms of returning. They needed the speed. You can't hate on it. He's going to have a role with the team. It's not a wasted pick because he's going to be a big part of why we win or lose games. Special teams, turns out, is a big part of football. Okay? Next up, at pick 156 in round 5, the Chargers selected Jordan McFadden, offensive lineman out of Clemson. Oh, dudes. Okay, so initially, when this name was announced, and I saw the photo on screen, and I see him standing there, and I see IOL next to his name, which is interior offensive line. I was like, cool. I'm down. I'm down, man. I'm down with the sickness, quite literally right now. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry for the voice. I hear it too. I'm down. I'm down for offensive line depth. I will never turn down offensive line depth. And funny enough, offensive line depth was actually very high on my list of priorities, even though I was taking it probably a round or two later. That's something that I wanted to see on this team. And that being said, I liked the pick at first. I just thought, in terms of depth, I was hoping to see a tackle, right? Instead, we got a guard or whatever this McFadden guy plays, which is, again, we needed, I felt like a tackle, we got a guard. But as I read into it, man, even though, he looks like a guard, only standing around 6'2", at second glance, it actually turns out he is a tackle, right? And I'm sure you Clemson guys out there are like, director, you're crazy. You're dumb. Of course he's a tackle. Look at this guy. He's nuts. At 6'2", you wouldn't expect this guy to have 34-inch arms. Okay, so for one, he's got that working out for him, and for two, this all of a sudden becomes a good pick that I was behind already in terms of offensive line depth to a great pick. All of a sudden, the Chargers, in my opinion, they got a swing tackle. I think he's definitely a great fit for us at swing tackle. Again, despite his height, he boasts 34-inch arms, and he is a mammoth of a player. Just look at the photo right here. Huge, huge guy. And he kind of fits what we've seen from the Chargers in terms of offensive line for the past couple of seasons. You know, I would say offensive line or tackles that grade more like a guard in the NFL, but the Chargers kind of don't care. They're going to play him there anyway, and they're going to look really good. 2 years in a row we've seen this with Slater and Sawyer. Are we about to see the same thing with McFadden? Are we about to see another slam dunk huge value in round 5 in the offensive line position? I think maybe, but we're not going to ask this guy to be a starter. Not that we did with Sawyer, but I feel like McFadden, he's going to step into that role of taking over like a Storm Norton, you know, that backup tackle on each side. And I think he's going to do great, right? And he might even be dark horse competition for Trey Pipkins. Who knows? He played all over the offensive line. He specializes on the outside. I think this is a great pick. And one thing, if I have to like tell you guys something that impressed me in just watching some of his highlights or whatever that the Chargers posted a couple days ago, his fluidity and speed for the position are very impressive for his size too. So he's going to be a great zone blocker in terms of run blocking. I think he graded out, if you're looking for his strengths, he's graded out as a really good pass blocker. Be excited for Jordan McFadden. I think the Chargers addressed a big need in terms of depth, and they got a really good guy to go out there and hold down the fort. So I'm going to give this one a grade of a B+. I think it's a good pick. Not a perfect pick, but I do think that it addresses something specifically that the Chargers needed, and it has plenty of upside in doing so. All right, next up at pick 200 in round 6, the Chargers selected Scott Matlock, defensive tackle out of Boise State. Now, first off, I think I read that Kellen Moore was like, man, we got the guy from Boise State. You know what? Honestly, when I was looking into it, I was kind of shocked to see how many people were just Scott Matlock fans from Boise State, man. If you look at their fan base, like Scott Matlock is beloved. they really, really like this guy, and it's because he makes such a big impact. And honestly, I was really shocked to see how much of an impact that he made playing from the interior last season. This guy was kind of a freak. Very much similar to, I would say, Tuli, where he moves a lot faster and smoother than you would expect for somebody his size because he's huge. I don't know, guys. I'm not bagging on the guy or anything, but if you took this angle and rotated a little bit, he's definitely a thick boy, right? He's a big guy, but man, you would not guess it with the way that he moves. Very, very impressive. As a matter of fact, I think his RAS score was somewhere, I actually have it written down right here, 9.65 RAS score. That is ridiculous. That basically means that for his size, the way that his speed, some of the physical attributes of him, like it's unreal. It's almost superhuman, right? Most players are going to grade between like 5 and 7 or whatever. Very few times you're going to find a guy in and around the 10 range, and Scott Matlock definitely fits the bill there. Now, one big thing that I'm very excited about Matlock, that I think, again, the Chargers needed to address depth, right? Both in the offense and defensive line. Defensive line, I think, was especially important because we lost Braden Fayoko, which is kind of a huge loss for this team. Low-key, huge loss for this team. While also losing Christian Covington. And I think Tito is not quite back from injury yet. So defensive line and depth was actually turning out to be a pretty big need. I think we got just that guy, right? I remember thinking that I wanted a Jomo because we needed that run defense guy. But when you take a look back on what the Chargers have on the roster now, in Tito, and I would say Austin Johnson, that's kind of their speciality already. We need another guy that I think can kind of mix and match in with a Morgan Fox, right? That brings that pass rushing ability to the table. Not that Matlock isn't good versus the run. He definitely is. This guy, if you're looking to have him step onto the field, you're hoping that he's getting to the quarterback or he's getting to the ball carrier because that's really his specialty. He's very freakishly good at penetrating through the in the middle to get to the quarterback. And again, that closing speed with how big he is, also kind of crazy to watch. Very excited to see this guy play. Go watch his interviews and some of his welcome into the Chargers as well. The guy's hilarious. He looks like a spitting image of Mad Max from the Raiders too. I like his personality. I think he's going to be a great addition to this team. And honestly, again, one of my favorite, honestly turned out to be one of my weirdly favorite picks in the late round in day 3, just because of, again, how big a need it turned out to be at the defensive line, but also how huge his upside is. I think in terms of guys that can develop into big difference makers, he just really reminds me of those dudes that you see the classic story of they're drafted late, but my God, those traits were so coachable. It translated into something much more impressive. in the pros. So I'm gonna actually give Scott Matlock a grade of an A. I think he has huge upside. I think it filled a huge need, and I think that, again, what he already brings in terms of depth and even rotation is something I'm excited to see in camp. I think he's gonna be one of those guys that in camp is gonna make Chargers fans very excited. I think if I were to choose a couple of camp guys for you dudes, I think Scott Matlock, Darius Davis, and I'm going to say Henley. I think those three guys are going to be your camp guys. The other rookies, I think they're going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to be very, very good at it. Now, to wrap up this video, which is, again, probably one of the longer videos of the season, but we have a lot to talk about in this draft class. The Chargers at 239 and round 7 select Max Duggan, quarterback at a TCU. Now, I'm not quite sure where it was in my live stream, but I jokingly talked about the Chargers after taking their second TCU player in Darius Davis. I joked about them taking Max Duggan. And I also mentioned that I didn't like the thought of even Max Duggan coming onto the team. I was bagging on him a little bit, man. I thought, and I was also thinking that, you know, some of the other quarterbacks that were being taken before, guys like Jared Hall and Sarah were not as good. And I was really wondering what's in the minds of all these people that are being drafted so high, and I was like, even Max Duggan would be really bad for me the 7th round. And lo and behold, the Chargers go in on Max Duggan. Now, again, I'm going to say first off, the talent of Max Duggan, I'm going to defend him first before I go off onto my grade. I think Max Duggan, in terms of what his potential in the NFL, it's okay, I guess. To me, he kind of reminds me of Easton Stick, right? He's got the mobility, not the best arm, but he's got the, I just don't know. He's got the some instinct, right? He's got a winner's instinct. And again, very reminiscent of an Easton Stick who just got signed to an extension by the Chargers, likely as our QB2 of the future. And the reason that I'm so upset, and I was so upset about a Duggan a selection in the 7th round, for one, it soured my grapes when it comes to what was probably one of the more perfect drafts that I've seen in a long time. But two, it made me feel like the Chargers fell back into bad habits, right? I'm less upset about Max Duggan, the player, as I am upset that the Chargers are about to use a 3rd roster spot and quarterback again. I don't see them just keeping him on the practice squad. I don't see them, you know, just okay, quite honestly, he's going to be taking up a roster spot for the remainder of the 2023 season and beyond. And that's just something that I hope the Chargers, I really hoped that they had just left that behind. I was like, yay, finally, you know, the Chargers, they got their backup. They developed him just right. Easton Stick's the dude. You know, we're finally at the point where it's just like 2 quarterbacks, right? And we can start putting other talent at other positions on the roster. Nope, we went back to that well. We got Max Duggan. He's going to be a project guy for a long time. I think in the long run, he's going to turn out to be a QB3, QB2 for some team, whether it's us or another team. But in the end, I think the Chargers, they're bringing in a guy that has chemistry with Darius Davis and Quentin Johnston already. It might help camp life a little bit. The Bolt Frogs, or the Los Angeles, what do they call it? The Texas Chargers University. In the end, it's going to create for an interesting camp life, an interesting offseason experience, but I don't think offers much in terms of value to the Chargers, especially when you had players like Trice still available on the board, that freakishly huge corner. There were still players that offered value that could have made the squad without taking up a roster spot at a position where you really don't need to. So there's Max Duggan. I'm going to give this one a grade of a D+. I think he's got some things you like as a quarterback, as a player, but for the most part, you passed up on value and you're using up a roster spot, and that really does tick off the director. So, all right, guys, with that being said, what is my final grade, my overall grade, my final grade of the Chargers 2023 draft class, rookie draft class? Honestly, I struggled with this a little bit because I feel like this is a much better draft class than a lot of us even now realize. Okay, when looking back in the past couple of draft classes, I think for the most part, there were a lot of picks where I was like, I don't know about that, especially when it comes to position or value. This year, I was less concerned about the position, maybe about the value. If there's one thing that held me back from this draft class, it was the value. I feel like maybe there were different areas or different angles you could have taken to get better value. But at the same time, that's just for a couple of picks. You take a look at value in most rounds, like round 2, that's a good value for Tuli. Round 3, that's an excellent value for Henley. Round, let's say 6, good value
for Matlock. Like, there's good value. Like, you're getting good value all over the roster. But there's those few picks like Quentin Johnston where you're just like, oh, there's these guys still there. It doesn't take away from Quentin being a great player, but there was other players still available. But overall, when I take a step back and I look at what the Chargers have done in terms of completing the roster, the kind of talent that they have in front of them, and honestly, for the first time in a long time, up until round 7, being like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, let's go. You know, instead of like, oh man, what are we doing? I have to give this draft an A-, right? And again, as a refresher, Quentin Johnston, B+, right? Solid first round pick. Tuli, A, he's going to be awesome. Daiyan Henley, A-, he's going to be awesome. Darius Davis, C+, maybe a bit of a reach. Jordan McFadden, B+, he's going to be awesome. Matlock, A, he's going to be awesome. And then Duggan, D+, whatever. I think for the most part, these are all really, really good grades. And I think the Chargers' future from this draft class is going to look very solid. And for the most part as well, I think there's a very clear and defined role for every single one of these players that the Chargers drafted this season. Whereas most seasons, we really don't know. We're going to be like, oh, there's going to be a competition, or oh, there's going to be this and that. No, this year, every single one of these picks has a role with the team. You got your receiver opposite Mike Williams in Quentin Johnston. You got your rotational / future edge in Tuli. You got your rotational / future linebacker in Henley, right? You got your return specialist in Davis. You got your swing tackle in Jordan McFadden. You got your depth guy at defensive line. Could even compete for snaps in Scott Matlock. The only guy I don't like is Max Duggan, who's going to be holding the clipboard. But either way, that's awesome. That shows me that we didn't waste any ounce of resources this year. So I'm going to give this draft class an A-. I feel actually very, very good about it. And I'm very excited to see how it translates. You guys in the comment section below, let me know what your grades are, and maybe some of your favorite pick versus your least favorite pick. You can leave out Max Duggan if you want. You know, pretend he doesn't exist. It can be your next one. But you guys let me know in the comment section below what you think. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been the Director. Hopefully by the next video, we get rid of the Urkel voice and we get back to the excitement for the undrafted free agents, which is going to be the next video. We're going to be grading those out as well. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been the Director. If you like what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Guys, I got to tell you, I'm so excited for Quentin Johnston. I'm so excited for a lot of these players. But Tuli, for whatever reason, Tuli is the one that just gets me super, super pumped.